Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I'm back for another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. And it is anything but flaming outside. We're experiencing snow flurries again, which is quite interesting because when I looked at the 5-day forecast, we were supposed to be at about 40 degrees today and sun, but I think somebody else who's pulling the levers and pushing the buttons might have had a different kind of scenario planned, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the passing of Rush Limbaugh. I have some thoughts on that and the absurd Schadenfreude that's being practiced by the so-called left. I'm going to get into that today. We're going to do a little catch up on Cuomo, who is now having his own party turn on him in New York State. The Democrats are actually turning on Andrew Cuomo. We're going to get into that a little bit, a few other things, and we'll see what comes up along the way as we move through winter in America. This is the fourth turning. You are in it now, and prepare for the Ice Age, the socio-political, socio-economic Ice Age. It is upon us. And we'll get into how to get through it, suggest a few things along the way. It is all about endurance now. And we're just entering into the, I would call it the sort of the lethal edge of what's being laid out right now. All right, so I'll try to soften it a little bit. Of course, there's always things that we can do, but we also have to deal with what's in front of us. If you don't deal with what's in front of you right now, you're not getting it. All right, let's see who's here. We got Natasha in the house. What's going on, Natasha? There's DJ MC. Good morning, Michael. MK. Hello, MK. Good morning. Lisa Marie's here. Hi, Lisa. Ian Barber. Hello, Ian. Good morning. Michael Pafford. Hi, Michael. Scott Bryan. Good morning, Scott. There's my man, Ryan. What's going on? Lil's in the house. TJ, Thomas Jordan checking in. Wendy Eater. Insomnia strikes again. Wow. I got up at about 3:50 this morning. Yeah. I went to bed early. Went to bed at about 9:30, which is very early for me. I'm usually up around 11:30, midnight. 9:30 is early. So 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:40, 6 hours. It's about right. So I got up and I was watching something. What was I was watching? What was I watching? I was watching something on, I don't know, some move. It was like a kind of a breakdown of a movie or something like that. It wasn't actually a movie, but it was one of those YouTube, like, I don't know, why there was tension on the set of The Guns of Navarone or some shit like that. So I was watching that and I fell asleep. And when I woke up to a documentary on Robert Mitchum, which Robert Mitchum was an interesting character. He was a really good actor. And just as a personality, really pretty unique. Robert Mitchum used to get high. There are scenes when he's got that sleepy-eyed look. He's high. I think he got busted one time for pot. That's how people found out that he was getting high. Anyway, so I kind of watched the tail end of that, and then I saw this documentary on Jane Mansfield, and I'm going to break down Jane Mansfield's chart a little bit on Sunday night. And now we'll be joined by David, the Leo King Palmer, coming back for another mashup with him. And so we're going to get together on Sunday night. But I think at some point, maybe before he comes on, I'll break down Jane Mansfield's chart, which is really interesting. And you can really get a sense of astrology in Jane Mansfield's chart. Venus-Sun conjunction in Aries. super hot. And when she died, the engine, I think it was the blade, or it was either the blade or the top block of the engine of the car that she was in, I think it was a Buick or a Pontiac, went through the drivers, went through the front of the car, right? Went from the engine into the front of the car, and it decapitated her and her husband. Well, it wasn't her husband, it was her boyfriend, this really slimy lawyer that she was hanging out with. And that's an Aries thing, right? She died with an Aries wound, and so did her slimy boyfriend. And it's going to be an interesting chart to break down. So if you're into that sort of thing, I'll be checking that out on Sunday night. And David Plummer again will join me, and this will be our third show together. And the first two have been just lights out. So I expect nothing less than that, because we've got a good track record with that, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about by then. Let's see who else is in the house. We got Scott Bryant. Hello, Scott. Let's see, Andrea Garland. Hi, Andrea. Good to see you. Charles Mazek. Good morning, folks. Today is Bloody Mary's birthday. John Travolta and Molly Ringwald. What are the chances? John Travolta. John Travolta did a movie. It's a very interesting and not very well-known movie. And it was considered at one time one of the greatest flops in Hollywood. And John Travolta, I forget who the other actor was, but they were actually Russian agents. And they were tasked with creating this kind of fake American town, but with Soviet ideology. Let me see if I can find that movie. And of course, John Travolta, living under the specter of his son Jet's death, at the same resort where Anna Nicole Smith wound up theoretically getting killed. Same resort. Okay, so let me see if I can find this movie. It's going to be back in the 80s. Let's see. Which one is it? Okay, it's After Staying Alive. Look Who's Talking, Chains of Gold. Look Who's Talking Now, White Man's Burden. White Man's Burden. I've talked about that movie before, which is predictive programming for where we are now. I think, is it Two of a Kind? Let me see. No, that's his love story with did a lot of stuff with Olivia Newton-John, didn't he? The Experts. Let me see this. Okay, it's called The Experts. Two New York City guys get jobs starting a nightclub in small town USA. They don't know it's a spy training model town in USSR. This is bizarre. So this is one of these kind of hidden in plain sight movies that they do every now and then. I'll show you the link. Here we go. It's called The Experts, 1989. It was a huge flop. Travis and Wendell are kidnapped while they are on their way to opening a nightclub in rural Nebraska. The KGB spy, Cameron Smith, takes them to the USSR, instead with the intention of teaching KGB agents to be hip like Americans. This is bizarre. Totally bizarre. Somebody gave it 5 stars, but the critics bombed it. Critics totally panned. This film was really threatening to be sort of the end of John Travolta's career in a lot of ways. I think this is where he meets Kelly Preston. Because Travolta comes off of some pretty bad movies. Basements, Perfect, Olivia Newton-John, Twist of Fate. That's a video short. What else? Two of a Kind, which is the movie we're talking about. Staying Alive, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever. Blowout, which is Brian De Palma's version of Conversation. And Blow Up, the Antonioni film. Urban Cowboy was the big hit in 1980, right? The big hit in 1980. What's interesting is that he did Grease in he did Saturday Night Fever in 1977, but he was still on Welcome Back, Kotter all the way up through 1979. There's a dude jogging right now. It's a dedicated dude. He's wearing purple. So there you go, little known John Travolta film. So today is John Travolta, one of Scientology's own. Let's see who else we have here. Let's see, Paulette. What's going on, Paulette? 6 degrees above zero with temps in upper 20s expected at 7,500 feet. My to-do list is so long that I may have to go back to bed and recover ambition. Unlike Biden, I do not spend evenings playing video. Well, it's reported that he plays video. Do we ever see him really playing video? I don't. Does he show up on D Live? I don't think so. There's the lovely and talented Joan S. Yeah, David Palmer and I, man, we rock it. Love David. All right, Carolina in the Pines. There she is. Charles says, Phoenix, regarding the influence of baseball coaches, Mr. Frank, I'll never forget them. Very positive, encouraging man. Thanks for the story. Great reminder. For me, it was Dick Rumminger. Dick Rumminger was my first introduction to a really, really good baseball coach. And it was my first year. I played one season briefly when I was 9 years old in Laguna Niguel, California. And then we moved during the baseball season. Very, very weird set of circumstances. And we wound up moving to San Jose. I moved, let's see, my fourth grade year, I moved 3 times my fourth grade year. So this was the third move in my fourth grade year. And in my third grade year, I'd gone to another school. So between third and fourth grade, I'd gone to 4 different schools. And when I moved to San Jose, we went from San Jose, Laguna Niguel, back to San Jose. When I came back to San Jose, I wanted to play baseball. I loved baseball. And I remember kind of getting to this place kind of late, and I didn't get to be a part of their tryouts, and the league had already started. And I had a friend, one of the few friends I had, who was playing on this team, and I asked if I could play. So I came to their practice a couple times, and the league said I couldn't play. And it was a total bummer for me because that whole summer, both my parents worked. So I was a latchkey kid. I was 9 years old. And I would get up in the morning. I would take care of myself, make myself a little breakfast, usually instant breakfast, Pop-Tart or some cereal. But then it would be game shows, dialing for dollars. And then once the pool opened at the city college, that's where I'd go. Every day. That was my routine for the entire summer. It was the first time I saw the movie Black Orpheus. I'm like, what is this? This is interesting. I like this. But I could have been playing baseball that year, but I didn't because they didn't have a place for me in the league. So the next year I wound up playing again, and Dick Rumminger was great. He was super positive. All the kids, we played 6-inning games, and all the kids would play 3 innings and then sit 3 innings. That's just the way it went. 3 and 3. So, I learned about, fairness and I was, I'm not going to lie. I was the best player on the team. So even being the best player on the team, I was willing to sit because, this is the way he demarcated things. And I'll never forget one time I was playing shortstop, and we had a guy on second. There was a guy on second base, and this kid hits me this ground ball, and I tagged the guy out who was running from second to third, and I throw a perfect strike to my first baseman, Eric Anderson. I think I've told the story before. And Eric dropped the ball. And I'm like, fuck, I had a double play. And I was pissed at Eric. And he got on my case for that because he could see that I was, making it a little bit personal, but I was hyper competitive. And I think he sat me after that. But he was great. And so I learned a lot about fairness and, positive models of coaching from him. And great guy, Dick Reminger. Hey, there's Jennifer Rubin, our resident star in the house. Nice to see you, Jennifer. Every time now I see these 10 best whatever films. 10 best. The one that I saw Jennifer on was the 10 best space horror movies. So every time I see these 10 best, I'm thinking, oh man, I wonder if Jennifer's going to pop in there. Smart folks didn't wait for this to happen before preparing. Well, yes, that's true. I was a 9-year latchkey kid from San Jose as well. Wow. Isn't that a trip? It's just such a different time, right? I mean, if you left your 9-year-old kid alone today, you'd lose your kid. You would not have a child. One day you would come home and your child would be gone. Somebody would call CPS on you. That's how it would work now. It was just different times, total different times. And that didn't change, by the way. I was a latchkey kid all my life. There was a brief period of time when my mother was home, very brief, like maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, and then that ended. I really liked it. I used to go home. I used to walk home for lunch and have lunch with her. But then back into the workforce she went. Let's see. Who else we who do we have? Lisa. Hey, Lisa. How are you doing up there in Wisconsin? Our Floridian friend, Barry, boiled water every morning and flung it up in the 25 below air to watch it make snow. Now when you boil the snow, not water, but now when you boil the snow, it becomes pink. Gee, I wonder why. Let's see, Viking Lass. Hello, Viking Lass. You and David collaboration the other night. Looking forward to Sunday night. That happened to me too, but we didn't move. The town kept changing school lines. Oh, wow. That happened to me as well when I was in the 5th grade. So when I was in the 5th grade, I wound up changing schools again because they changed the school lines. So I wound up going to 6th grade in another school with 8th graders, by the way, 8th and 7th graders, which was very different, right? And the demographic of my middle school was way different than my elementary school, way different. It was next to this area of San Jose that was predominantly, as we used to say back in the day, Chicano. And there were a lot of guys in blue jeans, white T-shirts, and either black or blue derby jackets. Those were the guys that I went to high school with. Most of them were okay. In fact, I became friends with some of them. But it was different, right? I mean, it's like, wow, man, I'm in like West Side Story here now. I'm not my little elementary school anymore. Dialing for dollars, yes. You know what I noticed? Nobody ever won with dialing for dollars. And it would be, in fact, it was rare when somebody was actually at home picking up the phone. You just kept waiting for somebody to know the count and the amount. It didn't happen. Crimmy's in the house. I was a latchkey kid too. Had to let myself and my sister in after school. I remember one time coming home to the house and it was cold. The house felt cold and empty because it kind of was cold. And I'll never forget turning the TV on. And all of a sudden the TV was my friend. The TV was, the friendly voice of the parent that was waiting for me. And I kind of got hooked on TV after that. Well, I was always kind of hooked on TV. Let's see. What else we have here? Ani Brito. I love being home alone. I never have a problem with it. I enjoyed it. I got in trouble a little bit, but I enjoyed it. Hey, Dorothy, good to see you. Our good friends from San Antonio. I look well put together this morning. Oh, well, you know, it's amazing what a shower will do. Shower can be a game changer. Let's see. What else we have? Hey, Jan. Good to see you. How are you doing? You staying warm? Biden signed the UN Small Arms Treaty 2009. He didn't come through. He will this time. Mm-hmm. Yep. J Mac, total 9-year-old latchkey survivor. Laugh out loud. Wouldn't have it either. You know, it breeds a sense of independence. That's what happens when you're a latchkey kid. It's like you're just independent. You learn how to do shit. You learn how to make food. I was in the kitchen making food, both in the morning and at night sometimes. Summertime, I would hang out with the neighbors. The neighbors used to watch me during the summertime, and my mother paid for them to watch me. But that only happened until I was about, I think, 11 or 12. By that time, I was home alone during the summertime. And the best times during that time period, around 12 and 13 during the summer, I'd get up in the morning, do my shit, and then I'd go down to this place where we would meet and play baseball. And, I would play baseball for like 2 or 3 hours. Loved it. That's what I did every single day during the summertime. Then that was after baseball season was over. And of course, riding bikes. I used to ride my bike all over the place. I used to ride my bike I lived in San Jose. I used to ride it to Milpitas, and it was an adventure to ride your bike and to travel long distances and see, other parts of other neighborhoods. And it was great. It was totally great. Okay, let's see. Who else do we have here? Lisa says, doing good, snuggling in, drinking coffee, and keto creamer. Lisa is also married to, partner with Pat, who is a hoot. If you ever need to get adjusted in northern Wisconsin, go see Pat and Lisa. NK, yes, babysat my cousin when I was maybe 9 or 10. We have had pink snow up here, very disturbing, nucleated snow. Victoria V says, my brother and I were latchkey kids. Would you guys mind sending the David link? Provide his YouTube handle so I can find it. It's on my Twitter. You should follow me on Twitter, by the way. I put a lot of stuff up on Twitter. Using the old rotary dial phone. Who fucked around with the rotary phone? I fucked around with it a lot. I was always trying to do things with it, like trying to figure out, like when you would call in for something, you would dial 6 numbers, but you could only have that dial thing last for so long because, I'll do this for everybody. Because it would revert back to the dial tone. But if you could get it at 6 numbers, and then when the time came to make that call, you just dial that seventh number, and then sometimes that worked. Here's the link to the show with David. Crank phone calls. Yes, I was. I was into prank phone calls. My friends and I used to get high and prank phone call to drug hotlines. That's funny. Yeah, I used to do stuff like that too, although I wasn't always high. That came later. Let's see. Reap Playlist says, I still remember my first phone number. Me too. Let's see. It was 415-251-8849. And I also remember my grandmother's phone number. 415-697-0329. By the way, that number still works. My mom still has a rotary phone. So does Joan. Let's see. What else do we have here? The Bodie abides. What's going on, Bodie? Good to see you. Yeah, one time I shut the. I was with a friend of mine whose father worked at a bank. I think I told this story before. And we prank phone called the bank. And I pretended that my name. I think my name was Philip Cole or something like that. And I pretended I had a Jamaican accent, whatever a Jamaican accent sounded like to a kid who was I don't know at that time. I think 14 maybe or 15. I think it was 14. And I told the bank that I don't know that somebody there had a bank account with our bank in Jamaica, and there was all this money in the bank account, and what did they want us to do with that money? And they wound up. I think they wound up like shutting the bank down. According to my friend whose father worked at that bank, it was like a big deal at that bank. And whatever. I don't know why I did that. But I think I was bored. All right, let's do a little vacation here and try to get into where we are, which is the sort of the beginning of the deep part of the fourth turning. Here we go. Dear blessed Holy Mother, Father, God of the great central sun within universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, and all the great avatars that have walked upon this plane of existence, we ask that only the highest and best information, truth, and wisdom come through everyone experiencing this stream, whether in real time or after. And we affirm and decree the qualities of community, brotherhood, agape, fraternity, all of the highest qualities of the Aquarian spirit that is really important and vital at this time. And may we open our hearts and minds to bringing the kingdom of heaven into our lives on a daily basis so that we can be proprietors and servants of that highest ideal. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, and clarified and removed from this stream. Okay, let's go. A lot to talk about today. Let me talk a little bit about Rush Limbaugh. I was never a Rush Limbaugh fan. I never listened to Rush Limbaugh. I remember the first time I heard about Rush Limbaugh, I was living in Olympia, Washington. And there was this guy who was pretty interesting. He had been in a band with Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses. Duff used to be kind of a punk rock guy. And then he hooked up with Guns N' Roses. So the dude that was in the band, he was interesting. And he was an Aquarian. So he's telling me about Rush Limbaugh. At that time, I'm into Bill Cooper. I'm into George Green. I'm having my head blown wide open. And he's telling me about Rush Limbaugh. And he was liking Rush Limbaugh. Well, like, who is this guy? And one of the phrases that he brought up was feminazi. And I'm like, that's interesting. What's that about? So at that time, I was still, I wouldn't have called myself a liberal, but I also wasn't, kind of out to bash feminism. I had a really cool girlfriend in college, I have to say, who was a feminist, right? Like, that's what her thing was. But she was a Leo rising, Capricorn, Scorpio moon. She had a really good heart. The ideology never came between her and I. She was great. But she was clearly somebody who had some, well, I wouldn't say male energy because she was very feminine, but she was an athlete. She was about 6'1", played basketball, came from a basketball playing family. She was interesting, but the whole feminism thing never got in between us. When I was off into esoteric, 12 Ray land, I mean, imagine her hanging out with me and trying to figure out what the fuck I was talking about. So, it was never an issue, at least for me. Later on, it became an issue when I began to experience like third wave feminism. But that was the first time that phrase ever came up. And I never listened to him on the radio. I never listened to Rush Limbaugh. I wasn't really interested in him because it felt to me like he was very narrow. I mean, he was very narrow in some ways. His take on, because I knew a little bit about his take on the social discourse, but it seemed pretty narrow to me. Like I saw other layers and levels of this stuff, including things that Rush did not talk about. Rush never talked about the Federal Reserve. He never talked about fiat money. He never talked about the bankers. He conveniently skipped over a lot of that material. And I think there was a show that he dedicated to the release of Jonathan Pollard. Rush Limbaugh was a Zionist. He was a Zionist. And you won't hear that. Or, maybe if you dig around the internet, you'll find that. But he was a Zionist. He was an apologist for Zionist Israel. Not Israel, but Zionist Israel. And again, I wasn't really that into him. And I remember one time he had a TV show and it was on late at night. And I remember watching it, with the ditto heads and everything. They were the most uninteresting group of people I'd ever fucking seen. And again, Flyover, Soul of America and all that stuff, which is true. But it was like, I don't know, it was just very uninteresting. And I watched, I'm like, why don't I want this guy in my head? And that was my relationship with Rush Limbaugh. And of course, he set the stage for a lot of talk radio. Where we are now with talk radio, where we are now with YouTube. And, there are people who are saying that on the left, thank God Rush Limbaugh's dead. He was the mouthpiece of divisiveness and hate and racism. I think there was a bit that he did. It was like some song about the magic Negro, which is, I don't know why you want to go there. It's not really, you're not going to win the middle over with something like that, right? You just don't want to go there. And plus it's, in my estimation, just disrespectful. You have First Amendment rights and you can do that. You could lose your sponsors too. If he did that today, I guarantee you he'd lose his sponsors. But that happened a while back. So now you have the left who are just doing the river dance on his grave. And, I don't know. I don't think it's right. By the way, I'm of the persuasion that if there was somebody who was really, really bad and they die, do you really, really have to lionize them just because they died? I'm not sure if Rush Limbaugh was necessarily that bad. Again, not my cup of tea. I think he probably did more to present a certain version of the truth, but not all of it. And in that case, he was a gatekeeper. If he's guilty of anything, I think he's guilty of being a gatekeeper. But is he worth the amount of scorn and the vitriol and the hate that is being heaped upon him? I don't think so. But we're in a time now where this stuff is fair game. Ruth Bader Ginsburg theoretically died. Well, I mean, when did she really die? That's a big question mark. But when she did, officially pass, I think it was fair game to look at her life and what she did and what her legal practice was, and to put it under kind of a review, a life review. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was an activist judge. She was not an impartial judge. She was an activist judge who would reach out to Congress to get bills passed for cases that came before the Supreme Court that lost, right? It was like, okay, well, this case, and it was about this woman who got terminated, and her case went before the Supreme Court. And they said, look, the statute of limitations ran out here. She's asking for things that no longer are applicable to her case. So we have to rule against her, right? Statute of limitations had ended. She might have had a case maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years after that, but I think it was over 7 years. So what did Bader Ginsburg do? Well, she went to the Congress and basically got them to pass a law so that this couldn't happen again. Like, that's not being a judge. I'm sorry. That's being a fucking lobbyist, okay? And there's other things that Bader Ginsburg did that I think they're up for review. And I think it's fair game. It's fair game. In England, people looked at Margaret Thatcher after she died. Her life was up for review. And I'm not a huge Margaret Thatcher fan. I'm also not somebody who detested Margaret Thatcher. She inherited a mess. Total mess from Ted Heath. And, there was all that government intervention and the strikes and wage and price control and huge unemployment. Like, she inherited that. And she, through the kind of free market principles that Reagan and, his administration were practicing, she kind of turned things around in England. I don't think she actually gets enough credit for moving them out of their socialist hellhole. Now, was she perfect? No, nobody's perfect. Was she, worthy of the scorn that was shown to her? I don't know. I'm not English, but somehow I don't think so. But I think people should have their lives examined. And if they are worthy of having their lives examined, and you can have kind of an informed opinion about it, I don't think it's unfair to do that. But when it's personal and isn't really like about that person, but about who that person represents in the group that they represent, and there's just this, intense broadside against that group, now we're into different territory. Now we're into territory that is really inflammatory. Because while there are certain people, like there are certain things that I think I would think, and maybe they might fit into Rush Limbaugh's paradigm a little bit, but I wouldn't consider myself part of Rush Limbaugh's world or camp at all. But there are some things that I could probably say, okay, well, that makes sense, and that makes sense, and I could see that. But again, just take this broad stroke brush and just brush everybody and everything with it, I think is dangerous. This is how fascism starts. This is how fascism proliferates. And they're doing the same thing with Texas. Right? There's all this schadenfreude with Texas. It's like, oh, gee, look at that. Ted Cruz is from there. Louis Gohmwer's from there. Your governor's Republican. Right? They're taking pleasure in the misfortune of people who are having a very difficult time. And this is not the America that I used to know. I was texting with Craig Simpson this morning before the show, and we were talking about this. And it's not that long ago. It's not that long ago when Houston had a massive flood and a hurricane called Harvey. And what happened? You had all these people helping out in Houston. J.J. Watt, leading the charity drive. You had the Cajun Navy. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what color your skin was. I mean, they were all in that thing together. And what was really interesting about that time is we're sort of on the precipice of where we are now. And I remember people like kind of dissing J.J. Watt a little bit. And that was really weird. It was like they had to begrudgingly sort of accept the fact that somebody who was white was actually doing something for the community in a way that they couldn't really refute. And that was really weird to watch. It was like this dude spent a lot of time and energy putting this money together. And by the way, it did not go to the Red Cross. He knew better. He knew better than to send that money to the Red Cross. He found local charities to put that money in. Go back to Katrina. What happened with Katrina? You had people from all over the country descending upon New Orleans to help. And, you know, they shut down the bridges. They blew the levees. You know, they stuck people in the Superdome. They created a living hell on earth. But the rest of America wanted to help, right? I mean, that was not that long ago. It was not that long ago. What was that, 2006, I think? It was 2006. It wasn't that long ago. You remember when Kanye kind of awkwardly said, George Bush doesn't like white people, well, black people. He doesn't like black people. Remember that? That was sort of like the first time we saw Kanye kind of go, ooh, this guy's going off script a little bit here. I'll never forget Mike Myers going, uh-oh. It was like, oh boy, I've got this moment now. I have this moment to deal with. And it's like Kanye hadn't quite articulated that thing yet. But he's right. He's right. He was right. So that was America. We all kind of pulled together. And now, you know, they're beating their drums for, people to show up frozen in the middle of the fucking street in Texas. You know, if they saw a baby frozen, you would probably hear the chant of or the celebration, right? The celebration of, oh, well, if that was a Republican baby, good. You would hear that now. And this is the world that we're living in, and it's not a good world at that level. And it doesn't mean that there aren't good people. It doesn't mean that we can't experience the things that, you know, theoretically have been the glue that have sort of held this country together in a lot of ways. I mean, we can, and I'm sure, and we will. It's going to happen. But now we're starting to see the sort of the ugly seams of probably, I would say, the last, 12 years of intense programming. Really starting, I mean, we started to get a little bit of it in Bush, but it really went to another level with Obama. And, you know, clearly with Trump, it was so divisive that it's taken on this, you know, intense edge now. And it's not pretty to look at. It's not something as a country or a people or a species that we should be proud of at all. And some of it had to do with the fact that Dan Crenshaw and Ted Cruz were pointing at California saying, see, ECC, this is what happened. You have rolling blackouts. And now that it's happening here, of course, they're pointing the finger back at them. Well, why are we having rolling blackouts? Well, it's because 23% of the power comes from these turbines in West Texas that are frozen. And it's more than that. Greg Abbott decided that he was going to have these people, an ERCOT, who don't even live in the fucking state, one of whom comes from Michigan, Governor Whitler's, one of Governor Whitler's hatchet people, to run our public utility grid here, which is independent of the rest of the country. That's what happened. And now, you know, people aren't going to go that deep into it. They're just going to point their fingers at Abbott. Now, all of a sudden, Abbott is becoming Mr. Republican. For the last year, he didn't want to deal with any of the Republicans. And I know this for a fact because I know Kyle Biederman. Kyle's the guy that put together the Texan. Some people think that this is one of the reasons why Texas is getting hammered because of this whole Texan thing. Well, it only kind of strengthens the Texan case even more in some ways, if you ask me. So Kyle told me that Abbott wouldn't talk to any of the Republican senators. None. Wouldn't meet with them. And every year I think it's every year, they have this meeting where they all get together. This last year, of course, they couldn't get together because of the but I think they had some kind of a digital thing. Abbott wasn't there. He wouldn't talk to him, shut everybody down. The nominal Republican head of and by the way, Texas is a Republican state because there are more Republicans in the state legislature with the Senate than there are Democrats. So the head of the Republican legislature appointed all Democrats to the committees. And people who are slamming Texas don't know this. They just think Texas is, beers, queers, and steers. But there's a huge amount of Democratic influence in the state. Apparently 42% of the state is blue, mostly in Houston, Austin, and Dallas, and El Paso. San Antonio, huge. Big cities tend to be mostly blue. Dallas got flipped. Austin was always pretty much blue. The same with Houston. But Dallas is a whole new thing. You know what's interesting too? San Antonio used to be a bit more on the red side. And for a long time, San Antonio didn't have fluoride. And it wasn't until they got heavily vested in Democratic leadership that the fluoride thing they kept bringing it up for a vote and bringing it up for a vote and bringing it up for a vote until finally it passed. So San Antonio went from no fluoride to fluoride. Democrats love fluoride. They love fluoride in the water. They think it's an entitlement. Oh. The poor children need the fluoride. Those poor children who can't afford their dental care. It's a bunch of bullshit. Found out here in this town. The wife of the editor of the newspaper in this town wrote a massive commentary, editorial on why we needed fluoride in the water. Right? I mean, come on. Anyway. So now all this, all the knives now are coming out for Texas. And now Greg Abbott wants to be a Republican. He's like, we need to be a Second Amendment sanctuary. He just said that yesterday. Oh, really? Oh, it took you how long to get there? So now all of a sudden he's doubling down. Okay, now I got to be really Republican. Now I got to do this shit to hold my base. He's another Zionist. There's pictures of him and Bibi together. Wonderful moment. Wonderful moment in the Holy Land. I'm going to save this till tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to do a show on the exposition of evil. Because they're moving all in now. They're moving all in. Bill Gates moving all his money in to purchase huge tracts of land. I think he's become the biggest farmland owner in the United States. So tomorrow I'm going to look at a lot of that stuff and try to, get people to understand all the different vectors that are coming at us now. And ultimately, where this thing is going to go, because all the cards are on the table. So tomorrow on the Friday Firecast, I'm going to put that together, and we'll just lay it all out there. And Gates is very active now. He's using his capital now to go all in. And there's others too, but we're going to focus on Gates. So the other interesting thing about Rush Limbaugh, he's born on January 12th, and David and I were talking about this on the show on Tuesday night. He shares the same birthday as Jeff Bezos and Howard Stern. A lot of times you find these interesting pairs that are born on the same day. If you go into the secret language of birthdays, you'll find stuff like that. And they're one of them. They're definitely one of them. George Steinbrenner and Al Davis are born on the same day. I always thought, man, that's kind of crazy. These two major owners and sports figures of the 20th century, both of whom had reputations as being tyrants. But the thing about Al Davis and George Steinbrenner is that, excuse me, both of them are cancer, sign of cancer, and they're both like, they rewarded people. Like there was loyalty with Al Davis. If you were in with Al Davis, man, he took care of you for life. For life. If you crossed him, he would destroy you. And it was the same with Steinbrenner. Bruce Lee and Jimi Hendrix, born on the same day. Weird connections with Bruce Lee and Jimi Hendrix. Both from Seattle. Both came from mixed marriages. I think they both went to the same high school, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're both buried in the same cemetery. There's a lot of really weird synchronicities with Jimi Hendrix and Bruce Lee. Jim Morrison and Sinead O'Connor, born on the same day. Both at a certain point in time were, kind of wild and Sagittarian-like. And Sinead O'Connor became involved with religion, right? She became a priest, which was very Sagittarian. And then, of course, they both had sort of fingerprints of MK Ultra on them too. So these birthdays are interesting. So we have Rush Limbaugh and Howard Stern, both of whom changed talk radio. They changed talk radio, one from the left and one from the right, and shared the same birthday. Interesting, huh? Okay, let's talk a little bit about Cuomo, the Cuomo sexual. Jasper, you're in a very friendly mood, aren't you? Very friendly mood. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. All right, let's turn our attention to the governor. Okay, the street now is blanketed with snow. Here we go again. Okay, here. Breaking: Democrat leaders in New York State Senate moved to strip Governor Cuomo of emergency powers. They're turning on their own now. New York Senate Democrats moved on Wednesday to strip Governor Andrew Cuomo of his emergency pandemic powers. This comes after news broke earlier tonight that the FBI and U.S. Attorney in Brooklyn are reportedly investigating Governor Cuomo's handling of nursing homes amid the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So apparently his aide that outed him. So there was an aide, one of his aides that outed him. Her mother-in-law works for the state Southern District of New York Court. This is the same Southern District that wound up suing the NRA and essentially bankrupting the NRA. The same Southern District that apprehended both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, the same Southern District that sued Donald Trump over his tax returns, the same Southern District that wound up naming Steve Bannon and all of his buddies in that wall building thing that they did. So that's all SDNY. Clay Travis checking in here. Is Andrew Cuomo still a hero for left-wing imbeciles? It's amazing how it took nearly a year to catch up with the media's false narrative that Cuomo was a hero for his COVID response. Reality is his performance is objectively worse than any politician in the world. You know, those elder care facilities became the killing fields. It's exactly what they became. And, I have to say this because, I'm kind of wired this way. Donald Trump went fucking hog wild on ventilators. And I know that maybe there was some use for the ventilators with the kids in the tunnels or whatever. I don't know. That was sort of the Q-stification, the Q logic. But he went hog wild over the ventilator thing. It was like this wartime effort. And he made sure that Cuomo got all these ventilators. And I remember watching the camera crew go into the basement of these hospitals in New York. The ventilators weren't even being used. But they were being used somewhere. Not all of them. They were being used somewhere. They were being used inside some of those hospitals. What was it, Brookhaven, or what was that hospital? And there was that nurse that came out and said that they didn't even know how to use these things. And people would show up with these respiratory conditions, a lot of which were based on probably anxiety. And maybe something along the lines of, I don't know, influenza perhaps. And then boom, they were on the ventilators. They had signed paperwork that essentially turned the hospital, the power of attorney, over to the hospital, like no permission to resuscitate. That's what they were signing off on. And that was happening in real time. And we knew that. We knew it was happening in real time. We knew it. So what was going on with the Trump administration? Like, why weren't they zeroing in on Cuomo, who was basically, leading the march to the elder care killing fields? Governor Andrew Cuomo attacked Assemblyman Ron Kim both publicly and in a private phone call as a war intensified over the state's handling of nursing home deaths during the pandemic. Yeah, he said he was going to destroy him. Who says that shit? I'm going to destroy you. I mean, this guy's a thug. He's a total thug. He's a bully. He's a petty tyrant. And he was enabled. He is not alone. Right there, everybody who's a part of the Democratic Party, I'm glad you're waking up in New York State. I'm glad you're waking up, but you enabled this monster. You enabled him. And it was politically expedient to do that. Because if you crossed him and you at that time were, locked and loaded with evidence that this was happening, your political career was sunk. It was over because he had the juice at that time. And you just did not question. You didn't question the response to the COVID crisis. But now they're waking up. They want to save their ass. That's why. Because they're affiliated with him. Like, he could take the entire party in New York down. The entire Democratic Party of New York State, even de Blasio is turning on him. And that's why they're doing it. Because they want to make sure that, hey man, we're still cool, we're good. Nobody will say, look, we they won't say, some of this is on us. We need to take some responsibility because we didn't call you out earlier. But But they won't do that. And this is unfortunately how society is wired. They're just going to point fingers like, you bad. No, you were on the watch too. And it's your job to look after, theoretically, the people that you're supposed to theoretically protect. And we know that that just doesn't happen. So now they're going to come out looking good. Now they're going to come out as being the sort of the, the vox populi. A little late. And the same thing happened in Pennsylvania and all these other states, and it's going to come out. Now, what they do with it, that's a whole other thing. I don't think the Biden administration and the DOJ with the Biden administration is going to go after Cuomo. I don't think it's going to happen. We certainly saw that with Trump's DOJ. He didn't do shit. And I don't think they're going to do anything as well with Cuomo. That said, I would not be surprised if he is forced to step down. He may step down. Because if he continues to fight this thing and obfuscate and talk around it and rationalize, it's going to get worse. He's got the South Node on his Saturn, South Node on his Sun. This is going to be his potential downfall. So I could see him either stepping down, but you know what'll happen? He'll do that Sagittarian thing. It'll be like, well, for the good of the people, I'm going to step down because this is just such a distraction right now, and we have much bigger things to tackle. And I'm going to do the right thing because I'm going to sacrifice my career right now and my reputation because I'm going to step down. And you may think that I'm stepping down because you know how they'll just run this bullshit out. And I think that'll probably happen. If it doesn't happen, I could see where it could get very ugly. Very ugly. I think we're really tilting towards vigilante justice. It's coming. And of course, the PTB, right? They know that. They know that's part of the program, and they'll false flag that shit. But at some point, people will just be pushed so far, and you can't push them anymore. And if there's no ostensible justice or reckoning that this quote unquote system is supposed to have built into it, which we've seen is it's completely corrupt at this point and broken, people will take it into their own hands. And it won't be pretty. And when that happens, now we're opening a different floodgate and the potential for a new reality, which should get very brutal. Very, very brutal. They're turning this place into, Ukraine. It's kind of Ukraine meets Venezuela. And you just have to understand that at this point. But it's not, we're not in a vacuum now. We're not in a void because we're seeing things. They're being revealed to us. And David and I talked about that. You got Gavin Newsom. In some ways, somebody posted something on one of my shows. And he said that it was good that Trump lost. Because if he had won, we would be sort of narcoticized and we would have gone back into this sort of somnambulistic state. We'd be sleepwalking and thinking that, everything was okay and he was gonna take care of things. And I think there's some truth to that because now people are really beginning, not just people on the so-called right, there are people on the left. Who was it? Naomi Wolf said, can I have my vote back? Because she's seeing what's going on with this illegitimate government. I don't know who's running the government, by the way. Somebody else is, some other entity is. I don't know if it's the UN. I don't know if it's China. I don't know if it's Jeff Bezos, but it is not the United States. When you look at his inauguration, and those rituals are really important. He did not get a 21-gun salute. They did not have 4 cannons. None of those guys had any kind of medals or insignia on their uniforms. They didn't walk the wreath back. They just walked up to it and kind of looked at it and, had their little moment. That is not legitimate. Those rituals actually mean something. So we're living in a different country, different rules of engagement. We're not in Kansas anymore. And I think that's what troubles people, because they know that this is not real, that we're living in this simulated environment in some ways, and people aren't being upfront with us or not telling us what's going on. So now we got to rattle some cages, and we've got to figure out kind of the sort of the depth of this thing. Meanwhile, we're having to deal with World War fucking III, with all these fourth and fifth generational warfare tactics that are being deployed, like weather and a virus, and we're going to have a food crisis and energy crisis. This is what's going on. So you're in it now, right? You're in it. You're in a major deconstruction phase. And we are deep in the fourth turning. We are deep in it. It is really winter in America. We are in Biden's dark winter. So what do? Well, you got to get through it. You have to endure in order to evolve. And it can be done. We've been dosing on Capricorn for the last 3 years, which is about endurance. It's about foresight. It's about long range. It's about planning. In Pluto, you have to transform your relationship with day-to-day reality in order to do that. And I look at these people in Austin. They have an 1/8 of a mile long outside of HEB. Like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? You knew that this was coming. You could see it on AccuWeather. It's like, oh shit, it's going to be snowing here in a week. You had a week to prepare. At the very least, a week to prepare. Now, the energy stuff, that's, whatever. Like, you really can't do anything with that in some ways. But you could have a gas stove. You could have a camping stove. You could have propane. You could have propane heaters. They make them. They're actually quite good. Did people do that? No. No, they didn't. Just so short-sighted. And now they're running to HEB. I mean, if the shit really hit the fan, but I mean really hit the fan, like this is a minor, shit hit the fan moment. But if it really hit the fan, you would see things you've never seen before. And we're close. We're kind of inching up to that. And, I sounded like a broken record there for a while. I said, look, you need at least a month's worth of supplies, at least a month. So if you've done your preparations and you're living in Texas, it's not perfect, but you could probably get through this for the next 2 weeks if you needed to. But, people are just living in la la land and thinking that somebody's going to come in and take care of them. Oh, Greg Abbott will take care of it. Oh, Joe Biden will take care of it. Oh, Donald Trump will take care of it. No, they're not going to take care of it. You've got to take care of it. And guess what? When you take care of it, they're like, well, you shouldn't be taking care of it. We'll take care of it. But do they ever do that? No. We just look at Katrina. All those people wanted to help. And what happened? No, we got this. We'll take care of it. Yeah, right. Remember Mike Brown, Brownie? The guy had no experience with disasters. None. I think he ran polo tournaments. He was a horse breeder or some shit like that. He was a friend of George Bush's. And then they stuck all those people in the Superdome. No supervision. The troops would show up in the morning. They drop off food, water, who knows what else they would drop off. And the Superdome became hell on earth. And Don't you think that they didn't have cameras there, that they weren't watching? They were taking all that in. They were seeing how people would react in an intensified situation like that. There were rapes, there were murders, people were falling off the third level of the Superdome. It was hell on earth. But people, we wanted to help. Oh, no, don't worry. We got this. We got it. Don't worry. So when you want to be self-sufficient, no, we'll take care of it. But when that moment comes, do they really take care of it? No, not at all. And this will be the precursor to, like, the FEMA camps and, food centers. And once you go to the food centers, good luck. And then, of course, we have, the background program, the vaccine. By the way, let me show you something on the vaccine. I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm just going to let you guys read this thing, okay? Because there are algorithms involved here. And I don't want to wake the algorithms. So there you go. But nobody will make that connection, right? It's just it could have been a byproduct of one of the effects of the so-called shot. But we're not going to trace it back to that. There's no correlation. It's not causation. Right. Okay. And yet, Biden is adamant that the Black American community needs to get that vaccine. And he even references the fact that, well, let's just say the Black American community has been at the wrong end of experimentation when it comes to things like vaccines and shots, like the Tuskegee project, where the men were inoculated with syphilis. They weren't told. So here we go. Let me play you this. This is the town hall meeting. And this is when we're really in trouble. But it's good. I think people can see this. And hopefully, and most importantly, I hope the Black American community sees this thing, because this should be a big time warning. Okay, so I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm just going to start maybe right here. Here we go.
Because almost everyone lives within, not always walking distance, but within.
This is ridiculous. Let me go back a little further.
Chairman says, need not tell you, doctor, over the last.
This is where he's talking about the shenanigans that were perpetrated on the Black community.
Number two, there's two reasons for it being the way it is. Number one, there is some history of blacks being used as guinea pigs and other experiments, as need not tell you, doctor, over the last 50 to 75 to 100 years in America. So there's a concern about getting the vaccine, whether it's available or not. But the biggest part of it is access, physical access. That's why last week I opened up, I met with the Black Caucus in the United States Congress.
So whoever this guy is, that's a classic opening. So he's saying that there is mistrust here because of what happened in the past. He's bringing it up. He's acknowledging it as if, well, that's over with, and we're going to make sure that we have enough oversight so it doesn't happen again, and he gets right into access. It's actually very clever.
And agreed that I would all of the community health centers now, which take care of the toughest of the toughest neighborhoods in terms of illness, they are going to get 1 million doses, a week, and with how we're
1 million doses a week, or how? That's a lot of doses, man. That's a lot of doses. And now Bill Gates is saying we need 3 shots. Oh, it'll go to 3, it'll go to 4, it'll go to 5. You're going to need a shot every 4 months for the next 5 years. Just look at his track record with the kids in India. Those kids in India got a minimum, I think, of 15 polio vaccines. A minimum. Some of them got upwards of 50. That's the Bill Gates model. All right, let's go back to President Nano.
We're going to move forward because they're in the neighborhood. Secondly, we have opened up, and I'm making sure that there's doses of vaccine for over 6,700 pharmacies, because almost everyone lives within, not always walking distance, but within the distance of being able to go to the pharmacy, like when you got your flu shot. That is also now being opened. Thirdly, I also am providing for mobile vans, mobile units to go into neighborhoods that are hard to get to.
Oh, doesn't that sound promising? Mobile units. Oh, okay. Hello. Hi, it's the mobile unit. We're here to help you with your vaccine. Look out the window there. More people. You see that they're carrying like 9mm. Oh yeah, they're there to help you. They're there to help you get your vaccine. The mobile units. Can't wait to see that. All right, here we go.
Because people are for example, even though everyone is within, basically 5 miles of a Walgreens, let's say, the fact is, if you're 70 years old, you don't have a vehicle, and you live in a tough neighborhood, meaning it's a high concentration of COVID.
We're going to come to your house and take care of you. Yes. We'll bring death to your door.
You're not likely to be able to walk 5 miles to go get a vaccine.
You won't be able to walk 5 miles afterwards.
The other thing we found is, and I'm sorry to go on, but this is really important to me. The other portion is a lot of people don't know how to register. Not everybody in the community, in the Hispanic and the African American community, particularly in rural areas that are distant and or inner city districts, know how to get online to determine how to get in line for that COVID vaccination at the Walgreens or at the particular store. So I've committed to spend $1 billion on public education to help people figure out how they can get in there.
He's going to spend $1 billion on public education so that people can figure out how to fucking register for a vaccine and how to get to the fucking Walgreens. $1 billion. It's going to take $1 billion to get people to do that. What kind of education are we talking about here? A PhD? A PhD in zombie-like slavery? This thing is so nuts when you listen to it.
That's we're also trying to set up mass vaccination centers, like
Mass vaccination centers, like Buchenwald?
places in stadiums and the like.
Are you
Stadiums? Mass vaccinations in stadiums. So we got mass vaccinations in stadiums. We've got the inner city health centers. We've got drugstores, drug chains. We've got the mobile vaccination. This is a very ambitious plan.
concerned about the rollout of this online? Because it has been incredibly confusing for a lot of people, not just older people. It's younger people just trying to find a place to get a vaccine.
Yes, and I have, because look what we inherited. We inherited a circumstance here.
Oh, please. Please. I don't want to go there. It's always kicking the can either down the road or up the road. So there you go. And if you're, so-called Black American, you should feel really good that Joe Biden's got your back. Not only that, but he's got 3 vaccines now lined up for you. And he's going to make sure that you can get them any which way that's possible. Don't you feel safe? Government really is kind of looking out for us, isn't it? I'm feeling a little cynical this morning. That's okay. I have a nice little ender for today's show, which I think is sort of uplifting in its own kind of in your face sort of way. Anything else to say today? Did I pull anything else up off of the internet? I don't think so. I think that's it. So we're living in this time of reckoning. We're all living in this time. It started in 2020, and now in 2021, you have to be the high priest of your own experience. You have to be the hierophant of your own experience. But the people, and I know a lot of people that went through it in 2020. It was like, that was a huge wake-up call. And they were looking at their life, and they were looking at their relationships, and they were looking at their work. I had this session yesterday with this young woman. She's a first generation Gen Z, born 2006, right there, Pluto, 1 degree Sagittarius. And it was kind of an amazing session. And the amazing thing about it was number one, how resilient she was. In fact, that was kind of the bookends of yesterday. I had a session with a boomer who had gone through a ton of shit and very resilient. Very resilient. And then at the end of the day, Gen Z, young gal, again, that same sort of resilience. And coming to this point where she's now realizing what's really important in her life and wanting to make changes and to really face them in a fearless kind of way. And we're all going through this, right? So, part of that reckoning for each and every one of us is to kind of look at where we are and where we've been and where we've sort of fallen short, or where we need to have our kind of relationship with this so-called reality revisited, and to break down the things that keep us from living in a much more kind of intimate fashion with that. And we've all been going through it to one degree or another. Some of us, we may have started a little bit earlier. I kind of got on it in 2018 because I could feel what was coming. And that's when, you know, I stopped drinking and I really wanted to change some, you know, very deep kind of core behaviors and patterns and habits in my life. And I'm still working on those things. But we're here now. And for some people, they've gone through that process. Now they're trying to figure out, well, what do I do next? How do I get through this time? How do I evolve? And you can still evolve. It's just that the aperture gets a bit more narrow, and you have to be smart, and you have to be willing to take what I would call affordable risks in some ways. So Cuomo is going through that reckoning. We're seeing that with him. We're seeing that with these public figures now. It's starting to happen. But it's not like it's going to end next week or next month. It may not even end next year. I think the next 2 years are going to be very difficult. In fact, I was chatting with Craig this morning from Radiant Creators, and you know, that's what he laid out. And you know, between now and 2022, we're in for kind of a very intense time. But it won't be without some kind of reward or upside, because you're really kind of on the cutting edge of spiritual development right now. Because it's so naked. There's really very little between us, our actions, our thoughts, and the so-called world around us. So take heart. This is a time where if you're willing to face certain things and deal with the potential risk reward at hand, it can be very powerful. It can be a profound time. All right. Let me play you this video. This crossed my screen yesterday. You know, it's one of these moments where, you know, theoretically, the good guy wins. But it's not your typical good guy. But it's a good guy who, guess what? Took care of things on his own. I'll show you the video. Porch pirate. Thought he had a clean getaway. Bro with a rifle had other ideas. So he's got one of those, what do they call them? Echo, or one of those porch cams. Check this out. Listen to this dude. We have a little dialogue here. Let's see if that gets you.
Put my shit back on this fucking porch. Yeah. I saw you when you got out the motherfucking car. You're trying it. Put my shit back on this mother.
Let's play that again.
Put my shit back on this fucking porch. Yeah. I saw you when you got out the motherfucking car. You're trying it. Put my shit back on this mother.
You notice that the guy in the car honks his horn. He says, "See you later. I'm out of here." And you know, the guy who comes out with the AR, he does not point the AR at him. That's really important, right? He just had it there, just like, "Hey, you better put my shit back on that motherfucking porch," right? So the porch pirate, that's what you call porch justice. Porch justice being dispensed. That's what happens when you take care of things yourself in real time. There you go. All right, I'll be back tomorrow. I'm flying solo, and I'm going to try to map out sort of this, the Legion of Doom. Let's call it the Legion of Doom. What they're doing and trying to break down this fourth and fifth generational warfare that is being essentially unleashed upon the populace. And it's not just here, right? It's not just in the United States. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in Australia. It's happening in New Zealand. It's happening in Africa. It's happening in parts of South America where the poverty level is rising. So everything that's happened with COVID-19 and all the restrictions and all the regulations and the shutdown isn't just taking place in the so-called West. And this is the program and the model to, of course, bring in the New World Order. And they're using social Marxism, neo-Marxism as a tool in order to do that. But that's not the end game. That's just the re-education of the masses so they can have a bunch of useful idiots. So we'll get into that tomorrow, and that's going to be here 12 noon Central, not here, I'm sorry, the 11th house, 12 noon Central Standard Time. Okay. All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Thanks for being here, and stay warm and stay aware. Keep your antenna up. Take care.